Good afternoon, YouTube. This is Greg from GregsTutoringNYC. How's everybody doing out there? Happy New Year, right? As everybody probably knows, or hopefully knows, the SHSAT is being scheduled to be on. It's supposed to start January 27th. Registration is open. So if you haven't gotten your My Schools code, some people are still emailing me about that. Contact your guidance counselor to get that, to start registering. Registration closes, I believe, January 15th, so you still got 2 weeks to do that, all right? Yes, I see some people coming on. Welcome. Hello, how's everybody doing? Please subscribe to the channel. I'm going to be doing more of these now that this is a little more real. In the meantime, I have hundreds of videos already about this SHSAT on here. So what I'm going to be doing, at least for this group of videos, is I'm going to be going over the actual this year's current handbook, the 2020-2021 Student Handbook. So we're starting basically from page 1. Part 1, I covered some of the intro stuff and some sample revising and editing material. We'll keep talking about that. We're going to do some more samples. And then I guess the next time, depending on how we do this, we'll jump into some more deeper stuff. Because the sample material is just as important. And what I like to do, instead of just giving you the answers, is to try to rip the problems to pieces, really shred them down and build them back up so that you have a good understanding of it. So if you're looking for whiz-bang answers, the answer key is in the back of the handbook. If you want something deeper, that's what I'm trying to offer you guys. A lot of you are still perplexed, especially in the Ela section, after reading the answers and what they mean. One reason for that being is that the SHSAT handbook doesn't really give good explanations, and that's not necessarily his job. The job of the handbook is just to give you some overview information about the test and how it's run, and some representational sample of what the questions might be. It's not intended to ever be thorough and detailed and all those kind of things like that. All right. If you're catching on this on the replay, hello as well. I'm Greg from Greg's Tutoring. I'm still me, and what you can do, especially if you're catching on the replay or if you're watching it live, you can pause and figure it out yourself and then see if my answer confirms it. What I like to do, especially in the math section, is give you alternate perspectives of how to solve the problem. So it's not only expanding your horizon, but it's adding to your solution tool set with insights and techniques to solving the problems that you never thought of. Because you might be able to follow a formula or a procedure quite robotically and thoroughly and be detailed and master it that way. But there's other ways to solve the problem. In your case, it may have taken 5 minutes. There might be an alternate way to solve the problem in 30 seconds. That's just as equal and just as important as you guys to know. Now, in the Ela section has its own concerns because a lot of you guys get so confused about it and you're almost solving it by gut, and you need to do better than that. There are ways to be doing that. One source of the confusing is your ELA in your classroom is a different kind of ELA than you're getting here. Okay, in ELA in the classroom, you can do inferences, interpretations, and so on. And on the SHSAT or other standardized test, or in cases where there's multiple choice, you really don't have the sky the limit opportunity. You just have to answer A, B, C, or D. All right, so that's really kind of the killer of the matter. Let me just make sure we're live here so that I'm not talking into nowhere. Give me 1 second. Meantime, you guys can always email me if you're running into any sort of problem. Don't hesitate to give me an email. Of course, I'm a tutor, so if you want to be my student, more power to you. You're going to get tons of insights additionally to here because even though I can give you some detailed information here, I don't know exactly what you in particular are having problems with. So that's key, and I can work with you one-on-one on your personalized issues. So let me just see if this is coming through. Tons of insights additionally to here because okay, and I will leave this here for the chat, I guess. All right, so if you out there, nobody's saying anything, that's okay. What I'd like to do is have an interaction though, so that if you guys know the answers, then we can do that. All right, let's just jump into this if nobody has anything to say. I covered a couple of the revising and editing section A sample problems the last time. I also covered some of the details here in some of the first few pages. Don't do the test without ever reading all this stuff. This is up to page 6. Read every page of the SHSAT. It's also important to read the directions in the beginning of the test, because on test day, you don't want to be spending time, which is equal to wasting time, reading the instructions. Unless they completely change to SHSAT, would really be a distortion if they did that. But if they really change to SHSAT, then you have to reread it. But part of the purpose of them providing the handbook to you is that you do know the format and design of the test, so that on test day, you're thorough, you know what's going to be thrown at you, or at least, have a good idea of it. And at least in terms of directions, the directions won't change. All right. Because on test day, you don't really want to be reading directions. All right. All right. So we did that. We did this. We did that. Okay. So today we're going to talk about the revising editing section B. Right? The test is split into multiple parts. There's ELA versus math. Within math, the two high-level categories is multiple choice and grid-ins. Okay, and I say two high-level because there's actually layers underneath that are not delineated in terms of the test or the grading. But there's like easy questions, hard questions. There's geometry versus trigonometry versus arithmetic versus algebra. So the ELA is split up that same way. There's other concerns you have. So the ELA is split up into two major parts: reading comprehension, which is a passage that you have to answer various questions about pertaining to the main idea and things like that. And then there's the revising editing section, which itself is split into two parts. So technically this ELA and math, and then math is split up into grid-ins and multiple choice, and ELA is split into revising and editing versus reading comprehension, and revising and editing is split into two parts as well. And then this, again, you can make your own sub pieces underneath there, and I believe you should. That's your best test taking strategies. Okay, so the last time we talked about the revising editing basically of sentences. Okay, this time it's going to get into paragraphs. In particular, this case, it's a passage. Okay, so we'll talk about that in 1 second. Let's just go over some of this here. What says, so the text is going to contain errors. Okay, it's going to be misuse of language. So if you remember from the last time, they said it was the language they're talking about is language described in the New York State standards. Okay, that's not particularly true, because especially when you go to the test literally says it follows the conventions of standard English. So it's that vague. So it means you have to know all these things to more detail than you're getting in the classroom. Okay, so it's misuse of that, unnecessary supporting details. So for instance, I'm talking to you right now about the revising and editing part B of the SHSAT. If I all of a sudden started talking about how to do exponents, that's unnecessary. That's against the grain of what the main idea of the topic of this live stream was supposed to be. Okay. There's also things like inappropriate, and normally this takes the form of an extra sentence thrown in the middle of somewhere. It might talk about a kid taking a SHSAT, and then he talks about his dog sitting next to him. The dog sitting next to him has nothing to do with taking the SHSAT. There could also be missing information. Either the passage says it's going to tell you something and doesn't, or there's just something completely obvious. And this normally takes the form of which sentence shouldn't belong or which sentence can be added. Okay. There's also missing inappropriate transitional words. So if I said, instead of saying, I am happy and I am glad, I said, I am happy, but I'm glad. That's a misuse of the transition word, but, because it should be happy. Happy normally has implications of joyousness and all this other kind of stuff like that. It's not always about words, it's about whole phrases and even whole sentences. So so in part A, it was really more grammatically focused. Now we're shifting away from the syntax of how, like if there's a missing comma or something like that. Now it's about missing thoughts and missing words and missing phrases or missing sentences, okay? So it's more semantic. It's more about the conceptualization on this part. So all this is part of proofreading, if you will. If you had your friend wrote an essay and was like, fix this for me, you're going to go across all of that. You're going to tell them, oh, bro, you should use a better synonym here. Hey, man, you put a period and you should use an exclamation point. There's a missing comma there, so it doesn't make sense. You wrote a list wrong. You put a semicolon in the wrong place. All this kind of stuff like that. That's more the revising, editing A part. Okay, the B part is just about the organization, how it flows, missing parts, stuff like that. Okay, and it could also be about your structure, how you organized it. So if you're writing about the steps to make a cake, and your first step is to take it out of the oven, you got something wrong there, right? So, and sometimes it's deeper than that. It's not as obvious. So that's a hard test, and that's what they're going to try to nitpick you on there. And then it just says other errors. Gee, thanks, right? Related to the language. And language, they're talking about the written word here and written standards. So, and on some other tests, you have to write essays or short responses and long responses. Because this is graded by Scantron, there's no essay part of it, so that no human has to necessarily process this. You could argue they can do document-based reading things. There are some exams that are graded by computer, even if you write the answer out in an essay. SHSAT doesn't do that. So in lieu of actually having you write an essay, they're giving you multiple choice things. And at some levels it's analogous and equal, and some levels it's not. If you don't know how to do a comma, you're probably going to write your passage with incorrect commas in it too. Just as a general comment, even though it's true of other tests, the SHSAT normally doesn't deal with spelling errors, but don't rule that out either, because when a T is into capitalization, and if you put like New York, comma New York, that's theoretically about a proper name or the name of a park, Central Park. Park should be an uppercase P, so it kind of goes beyond just raw spelling. So that's part of what we're trying to get at here too. And they give you some general tips. First, read the text carefully. Okay, being mindful of time. There's other deets in here. You're looking for supporting details. Next, answer each question carefully and refer back and so on. Okay, so here's an actual sample. Okay, so it looks like a reading comprehension passage. So I'm telling you guys that instead of looking for things like the main idea, they're going to ask you about how it's organized and structured, and its kind of semantics from more of a formal level than actually what it's saying here. Okay, in the reading comprehension part, it's really worried about your comprehension and exactly what's flowing here. So you should approach the two sections differently. On the other hand, if you don't understand the main idea of this passage right here, game night, you're not gonna be able to answer some of the questions right either. Because if they ask you, like the sentence number 6 here, be removed, you have to understand what the passage is saying to decide whether it's removed. It's not like it's gibberish. They're not adding gibberish sentences like in the other section we just went through in those samples, where it's like a missing comma. Okay, it's not going to be as strict as like they just put X, X, Y, Y, Z, Z. They're not just going to throw that into the middle of here, or put like just randomly left parenthesis, right parenthesis. Okay, so you have to semantically, meaningfully understand this passage. So, so even though you could go back to some of the other questions like here, where they're just giving you two sentences about the whales and another one about the whales, and they're asking you to combine it, that's not exactly what's going on in this part. And even this, you can't answer this question right without semantically understanding what the author was originally saying in those two sentences. You can't combine them. These are not just two lists of things. Like I went to the grocery and bought A, B, and C, and I went back to the grocery and bought D, E, and F. Well, that's simple. I went to the grocery and bought A, B, C, D, E, and F. Okay, these are deeper than that. There's meaning involved in some of it, and that's what we're trying to figure out. In the case of this one, I believe the answer was D, if I remember. That word using was significant, okay, to delineate how to get the right answer. And if you don't understand how all the parts are put together in terms of syntactically how to write them out, then you're screwed. And again, we could argue the proper way to write answer G was to write it in two sentences, but that's not the form they're giving to you. They're throwing at you complex language in some cases. that you have to rip apart and try to figure out. All right, before we continue, I'm going to make sure we're still live. Yes, we are. So here's what I'm going to do with this. Because it's a passage, and I didn't do this in any other of my live streams, I'm going to rip this apart pretty well because I think it's something you guys need to do too. And what I'm going to do now will apply also to the reading comprehension. So for starters, this is the title. And that's part of your main idea as well. Okay, so if they give a title, you always want to make note of the title. Always want to make note of the title. Okay, it's not too helpful, but we know something about game night. Now, in most passages, this is not universally true. The first sentence might be the topic of the whole passage. It might even be the main idea, but usually it's the topic. So let's really see what it says. Some people think that board games are outdated and boring, unable to provide much entertainment to today's electronic savvy teens. Okay, we haven't read the passage yet, but it kind of looks like a good opening statement. So I'm going to just put T's around this to say that this is our topic sentence, not of the paragraph, but I think of the whole passage. I'm going to make a guess at the moment. Okay, so let's see what else it says. So some people think that board games are outdated and boring, unable to provide much entertainment in today's electronic savvy teens. But opening a cardboard box full of colorful and sometimes elaborate game pieces can offer a refreshing experience, one that cannot be matched by a video game or controller. Playing board games is really quite fun. Okay, so now you're told to underline and circle. Let's do something on the side here. So it's talking about games, right? Board games. So I'm just going to use my own code, BG. So what does it say about board games, right? It deals with electronic savvy, and you have to figure out about reading your own handwriting here. Refreshing. And sorry for my handwriting. And fun. So it gave us some facts about board games, right? It's an alternate to the electronic. They're refreshing and they're fun and cannot be matched. So I'm going to put my own code, which is an exclamation point, matched. Okay, so they're giving me some facts about it. And this is kind of my annotations for this first paragraph. And the reason I'm doing this over here is twofold. One is it's forcing your brain to think about what you just read. A lot of you guys read these passages, and they are boring. They're ridiculous, they're boring, and what you guys try to do is you go overboard, and you try to memorize them so that when you get to the questions, you're trying to refer back. And that is not your goal here. Your goal here is just to get a top-level view of what it's about. And that's why we're putting notes over here. So the first thing we're doing is we're forcing ourselves to acknowledge what this paragraph even said. Okay? And by writing it over here, you're almost running through the paragraph a second time. In a way, you're giving it like a 1.25 read. By writing some of your notes out explicitly here in your own handwriting. I didn't write sentences over here. I didn't write a paragraph. I didn't write an interpretation. I just pulled out some of the more significant words that were in this. And I can go back to the side now and just read that. Board games, alternate to electronic, they're refreshing, they're fun, and they're not matched by video games. Okay? And I'm going to hope, and it may not be true, I'm going to hope, maybe I get a list of that all along the side of here. Okay? So now let's go to the second paragraph. Board games have exploded in popularity in the past several years as people have discovered how entertaining and interesting a complex and strategic game can be. And the board game Ticket to Ride players can compete against each other. So we have other facts. Entertain, which it's talked about entertainment up here too, right? Even though it was talking generally, it's reinforcing that board games themselves also entertain. They can also be interesting. They can also be complex, okay? And they enforce competition. Okay, the goal is to create a long railway that connects players compete against each other. The goal is to create a long railway that connects destinations to a map. So this is getting specific about that one game. In some ways, this is a distraction, maybe. Maybe. So when you're reading, you're trying to figure this out because there's turning points to passages, including these ones sometimes. This requires collecting resources and building rail lines in strategic places. So it's getting back to this might be complicated and it involves a strategy, right? So the game encourages players to think in new ways. Encourages you to think and brain exercise. So because I just read this, I'm not writing everything out here. Remember, the goal is this. This is to give you a helping hand, okay? The passage is the meat. So all you're trying to do is reinforce what you're reading by putting these little bullet items along the side here, okay? And it could be as bad as my scribbles here, because all you're doing is that 1.25 read, if you will, okay? So you're reading the passage, you're making notes to try to tap yourself, poke your head in the brain, and say, let me just kind of make a note that these things were said, okay? So that's it. The third paragraph, so then the main idea of our first paragraph is that board games are actually interesting and fun, and even though they seem outdated, they're still useful there. What's the main idea of our second paragraph, right? Because normally you look at main ideas of passages, but main ideas of paragraphs are also, so there's even main ideas of sentences sometimes, okay? So the main idea of this thing is that so most of this is about Ticket to Ride, but that's not the main idea of this. Okay, that Ticket to Ride was a supporting example of what the main idea of this passage is. It's that because Ticket to Ride involved competing and connecting map stuff, which is often hard, and collecting resources and having strategy, it's about what the last sentence and the first sentence says. That there are complicated board games that basically test your strategy and your brain. Okay, so that's really the main idea of that. Okay, and you should be making note of that. Maybe on your left-hand side you can do that. Okay, the third paragraph is that playing board games with others. So now they changed the topic. You should note that there. Okay, this is a topic change all of a sudden. All of a sudden, it's almost a turning point in the story. Okay, if you want to look at this as a story. When you take part in a board game, you get to know other players. People separated by generations can find common ground across the table from one another when they are all enjoying the same board game. In addition, playing board games can often encourage a discussion among players about a variety of topics. So if you're playing the game Ticket to Ride about the railroad, you might be talking about some aspects about that. Grandpa may toss out a story about a rail ride, or somebody may have just been along our railroad yesterday, and they just shoot out a funny story that happened or whatever. So it's encouraging activity through the group, not just of playing the game, but of the spirit of being together and collected together, right? So that's part of the main idea of what's going on there. Some games are even developed as learning games and aim to teach each other about the topics as they play. I believe, I'm trying to remember, that's similar to like the game Where in the World is Carmen Sandiego or whatever. That's part of, I think that was about from a social studies perspective. In a world where digital interactions tend to occur more frequency than true face-to-face interactions, coming together in person to enjoy a board game can be a fun way to maintain and create connections. So what you want to grok out of this is together, being together with different people, connection, right? The tablet's not letting that come through for some reason. Interact. Okay. And it's just about people, and you don't have to write words all the time, right? Person just like yay, and there's another person there too. Yo. Okay. All right. I'm just going to take 1 second to make sure we're still live. Yes, we seem to be. There's a few people out there. Hello again. I'm Greg from Greg's Tutoring. If you guys have any questions about what I'm talking about, just throw them out. Let's try to stay on topic though. At the end, I'll ask if there's any non-topical questions really. But toss out what's out there, and when I can get to it, I can. You guys can always email me as well. All right, so that's the first 3 paragraphs. Let's try the next 2. In addition to helping people develop relationships, board games give people an opportunity to hone skills that apply to real life. So they're going to change the topic again. So we have the general topic about board games. That's our main idea. That's our running theme. And each paragraph is dedicating a little to each of the variety of what that's about. Competitive board games challenge people. So that's sort of a running theme here too, right? And use strategies to outwit one another. Cooperative board games require players to collaborate and use their individual strengths to achieve a common goal. The act of playing almost any board game can help a person learn to be a humble winner and a gracious loser. Oh, so it's going even beyond that, okay? And improved focus, self-control, or whatever. So this is the same. So I'm almost going to put like double quotes. It's pretty much everything it said above, but it's now talking about cooperative kind of stuff. The spirit of a team, if you will, right? That kind of thing. And it's also not only team though, but this self-discipline. So I'm just going to put self-D, self-discipline. Okay. Should we write annotations after every paragraph? Or we can just write down the main idea after reading the paragraph. It depends how good you are. This is something to get you jump started. I don't do this because I know how to do this already. So it's something familiar with me. So this is one of those, if you're at the crawling stage, annotate. All my annotations could have also been circles and underlines. And if you're grokking in enough, so if you're getting 25 out of the 57, absolutely do this. Also write the main idea as well, probably, because you're that confused, that kind of lost in it, if you will. But at minimum, you should be doing this either physically, like I'm writing on the other side, or at least mentally on the side. And this is like if you do 1 + 1 = 2. Like I always say on the math section, to write everything down, but not the stuff that's obvious. Okay, so once you know that this is the kind of stuff you're supposed to be looking for as you're reading the passages, because a lot of you guys are so focused on the actual words that are there that you're missing the point of what they're asking you to do. You're so focused on like, what exactly does sentence 16 say? That's not what you're being asked to do when analyzing these passages. Yes, you must read sentence 16. Yes, you must understand sentence 16. But it may turn out that sentence 16 had nothing to do with the questions. You have to remember too, at the end of the day, you're not being scored on reading the passage, even though you have to read the passage. You're being scored on answered particular questions. So for instance, if there's no question on paragraph number 1, then maybe it's not important, okay? It may also turn out, but don't get me wrong, paragraph 1 might be the most important paragraph of the whole passage, and you have to grok it to be able to understand all the other passages. So this is yin-yang that has to happen. So to answer your question kind of straight up, no, you don't have to do this, but at least cognitively, you must be processing it. When you get at each paragraph, just think for a second, what was this about? What's going on? The next paragraph, what was this about? What's going on? The third paragraph, what's this about? What's going on? Until you get to the end. And as you're reading along, you're building up your understanding of what the author's trying to communicate with you. So you're taking each sentence by isolation, each paragraph in isolation, and then the whole passage in isolation. So I like to have a top-level view, especially in the reading comprehension part. That this is not the reading comprehension part, which is kind of look at the questions, go read the passage, and before you answer the questions, snapshot what the main idea is, and snapshot in a little form like I'm writing on the side here. You're not going to snapshot in a paragraph. You're not going to snapshot in a sentence. Just snapshot in a phrase. Okay, so that's all we're trying to do is snippet stuff and get a grip on ourselves. We're really trying to get a grip on the passage by doing that. So we're not trying to memorize the passage. We're not trying to speed read all this stuff. And as you get better at this, you're going to start noting, oh, this is what's important. Oh, look, there was just a turning point in the story. Oh, look, the author just threw out something real important. And because your job is to delineate when you're reading these boring, dry, ridiculous passages, what's important versus what's not important. And that's one of the biggest stopgaps you guys have. You don't know what's important, so you're putting 100% into every single word, and you don't have to, right? So that's kind of a long, meandering, scenic route answer to your question, but that's your goal here. So let me see your question again. Should we write annotations after every paragraph? For now, I would say yes. Or can we just write down the main idea after reading the passage? Do that as well. So again, if you're getting 55 out of 57, then this may not be for you. But you know, if you're getting even 40 out of 57, this is something to do. And you have to practice it. You have to go back and practice it. This is one of the big fallacies with, like I keep saying, main idea is one of the most important things you have to get out of the passages, especially in the reading section. But even in this section, you really have to get into there and get into that nitty gritty of it. And some of you don't even know what main idea is, but you have to get into there and rip it apart and get to that point. And it's the main idea that's more important than every single last painful detail. And the passage, even though they're 5 or 6 paragraphs, the passage is going to wander all over the place. There will be stuff in the passage that has nothing to do with the main idea. It's filler information. It's like me talking about the SHSAT and that now all of a sudden talking about my dog sitting next to me. Like you might say, what does that have to do with teaching us about how to do Rev B of the SHSAT? It has nothing to do with it. All right, so that's part of what the point is there. Okay, so then there's the last paragraph. Playing board games is an excellent way to exercise one's brain. Engage with one of the people. So now they're kind of summarizing this stuff. So this is stuff you actually wrote on the right-hand side there. Okay, playing board games is an excellent way to exercise one's brain. Engage with other people and practice essential strategies for handling real-life situations, right? That's kind of probably exaggerating the point here, but still. There are hundreds of competitive and cooperative board games that can provide the ideal balance between entertainment and challenge, okay? So I took the long, painful, excruciating read of this just to try to kind of show you guys how I rip something like this apart, either literally by writing on the side or at least meaningfully in my brain, that I'm not just writing these boring words that I'm just fighting and struggling to stay awake and fighting and struggling to try to piece it all together. As I hit each paragraph, I do say to myself, what's going on here? What happened? What happened in all the previous paragraphs to get me to this point? And of course, you have to do all this in seconds, right? This is not it just took me half an hour or whatever the heck to do this. You're doing this and you're reading the whole thing in 5 minutes. And you're doing your notations in that same amount of time. So if you look at the main idea is about game night, for sure, that's the topic. The topic sentence I originally thought may have been the topic sentence, sentence number 1. It does turn out to be the topic sentence. Okay? All right? So, okay, this is where we might get funny because now we have to get to the questions and it's going to scroll up the screen. So here's what I did. I'm going to put the questions. So the first question is about sentence number 10. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to pop something else up on the screen. Let me bring that up. So for sentence 10, we're not so much worried about the first 2 paragraphs. So let me bring up a file in the middle of that, which should have sentence number, the question numbers on it. Give me 1 second, guys. I set this up just before I started the stream, but it freaked out. So give me 1 second. Let's see, where did that go? Okay, it's here. Wait a second. Okay, this way we can get the questions on the screen, as well as some of the passage. I have about 10 tabs open on my computer, so I'm going to try to do this, and I have to be squinting or whatever as well. So where are we here? Let's see. What question is that? All right, so we went past that. That's game night, the passage right there. All right, here we go. So if we do this, all right, so there's our questions right there. Which revision of sentence 10 best maintains the formal style established for this passage? So what I'm going to do is before we look at that, we're going to look at the form of the questions themselves. So I like to look at things in terms of structure. So if we take the questions, there's 2 parts to every answer. There's something, comma, something. So I'm literally going to draw a line down through it. Whoops. Here, let me do that better. Give me 1 second. So there's 2 parts to each thing, and we're going to approach the ELA section. What I like to do is approach the math section as if they were English problems, because we still have to read them and understand them. So I also like to approach the ELA section as math questions. So as much as this is about the formal style, that's what they're asking us here. As much as this is about the style of the paragraph, there's also a structure in the answer choices. So it goes when you, when people, when you, when people, and then it's you versus they and you. Does everybody see that? That should leap out at you guys, that they're making those choices. Okay? So if you look, it's asking you about the style here. Okay? There's no other question here. This is strictly about the style of the passage. Okay? So in terms of the passage, was it first person? Was it active voice? Those are the kind of things you're looking at here, which involves the tone. So if you look through the passage, right, even though it talks about when you take part in this game, it's also talking about things generically. So it was talking about people collectively. So to me, just for that reason alone, A and D are not choices to me, because the narrative is not of that form. It's not about you. It was really about us, and it's just talking about the reader in general, about board players. It wasn't necessarily about you as a board player, although at points it did go there. It was talking about people being board game players. Okay, and that's a big difference. Okay? So if you now analyze B versus C, it says when people participate in a board game versus, I'm not even going to look at the second half yet, when people get together for a board game. Okay, so from this half here, right? This half here, B and C are equal. They're not exactly equal. Getting together doesn't necessarily mean participating. But that's the general notion of what they're talking about here. That's what they're saying. Okay? So then we're left with now trying to, so this is really our tiebreaker. So we're into B versus C is the tiebreaker. Okay? And now it's talking about specifically. So I've approached this so far from the general main idea of the whole passage, because that's what it's talking about too. So as much as this is about sentence number 10, it's also about the whole passage as a unit. And that's why main idea is important. That's why grokking the whole topic of the passage is important, because this is specific about sentence 10, but it must relate to the whole passage as a whole. Okay? So let's look at 10. Let's go back to 10. Okay? And I still have the answer choices on the screen. So we know we're only looking at B and C at this point. Whoops, wait a second. Where do I have that in my screen? Here it is. So which revision of 10 best maintains the formal style? So I'm going to just highlight B just so it pokes out for you guys, so you have some line in the sand to be looking at. So we're trying to compare B versus C in terms of that. Anybody out there viewing have thoughts on the matter about which might be the more superior way? They're pretty equal. It's almost hair splitting. So how do we break the hair split? Because even like I said, even the first part of B and C, they're not exactly equal, but they're close enough in terms of the spirit of the question, right? And the spirit of the question is just as important as anything else. So again, we're looking for formal style. What's the formal style in the passage that we're trying to maintain the integrity of that? Would that be B or would that be C? So is it about people, because that's the subject, right? It wasn't about you. Is it about people developing relationships with each other, or about people learning about each other, right? Both are talked about in the passage. So this is why this becomes hair splitting. Which one is it? And we can use the notes we put on the side for part of that. So the notes on the first paragraph don't really help us, because it says it's refreshing, fun, and it's not matched by video games. The second part was about competition, thinking in the brain. So the competition's there. Okay. I think B, because it is said in sentence 15. Aha! So that even turns out to be the topic sentence of this paragraph. Very good, Brian. Okay. First of all, it's about giving people, right? Helping people develop relationships. So this says in addition, this is a transition word, but it's saying in addition to what I said above. What did you say above? It was about people developing relationships, right? And that turns out to be, even though the whole passage is not intimately related to developing relationships, that's what is a running part of this, okay? Even though it's hair splitting. So that's good. So that's why it says develop relationships with each other. Now, another way to approach this is that it certainly implies C is true. And it certainly even, I think at some point says that, because it says like somebody could tell a story about each other or whatever. Where was that? So 13, don't misapply 13, because this was teach players about a topic, not necessarily about each other. I do think there was a point where it said you can learn from each other, though. Maybe I'm misremembering that wrong. But in any event, if you view C that you can learn about each other as a way to develop relationships about each other, you can view C as a subset of B. Okay? It's also true that you can look at B as a subset of C. I'm talking about the second half of it only. But the hierarchy is really C is under B. Okay? It's not necessarily the other way. You would develop a relationship with somebody and then learn about them. Although it's true you can learn about them and then develop a relationship. But that's not really what the author here is trying to communicate to us. So a big running theme of this, like board games don't exist in isolation. They're about playing with each other. Otherwise, the person would be talking about solo games, playing games solo, right? So that's key here. So how do we approach this? We rip the passes to pieces, right? Either literally or like I did here. We rip the question to pieces, okay? And then we rip each of the choices to pieces, right? And of course, I'm doing this in slow time. You guys have to do it in real time, all right? And this is the analysis. You have to get to every single passage, every single sentence in the choices here. You don't really have to give the analysis to actually reading the passage. And the good news is because you took notes and the passage is there, there's most of the stuff you can look up, okay? It's rare that you should get lost looking something up, especially when you took notes. And your notes can be of your own form. You don't have to use the style I did. Some of you will find just underlining and circling. Okay, the problem with underlining and circling is that, let me rephrase, not so much the problem. The good thing about writing notes on the side is you can put things in your own words, including this little diagram I did here about two people cooperating and so on. Okay, you don't even need to write in English. You can just write in code, as long as you can go back and read your own code. I put double quote here to mean the same as above, right? And by the way, that worked out for what Brian pointed out, that 15 was referring back to the above, right? So that's what the double quote means. It just meant everything that was talked about earlier, all right? All right, so let's go to question number 2. So let's try to look at that in and of itself first, and then see if we can relate it back to the questions. And let me just make sure your screen is not screwed up. No, your screen is good, because I have that second little thing showing in the way. So is there a pattern in the answer choices? So let's look at the question first. Which sentence should be added to after 18? So after 18 to help develop the ideas in the 4th paragraph. And then they give you a hint that it's actually 15 to 18 as well. All right, so if we go back to 15 to 18, what did it say? After sentence 18. So we're looking at the end of this paragraph right there. Okay, right here. What can be added there as a concluding sentence to this paragraph only? Okay, sometimes a clue in here is that the answer should have a transition word. Okay, that doesn't need to be a guarantee to have to be the case, but often it's the case, okay, that there'll be a transition word. So we're trying to add something there, okay? So I'm looking at the choices. There's no transition word this time. So which sentence should be added after there? So playing board games can teach a person about how to manage daily obstacles, the skills. So I don't see a pattern there. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to bring it back so that I can see the both of these at once. We have the question choices here. Let me scroll that up. We have E, F, G, H. Let's get rid of this because it doesn't apply to that. So which sentence should be added at the end of this? So it helps develop the ideas in the 4th paragraph. The ideas in the 4th paragraph were about cooperating, right? Collaborating, achieving a common goal, being humble, having self-control and self-discipline. So which sentence seems to support that general notion? So this one is kind of moving away from the main idea of the whole passage, but it's focusing on the main idea of paragraph number 4. So which one seems to do that? So let's kind of rip it apart. Playing board games can teach a person a lot about how to manage the daily obstacles that are a natural part of life. Okay, so that is certainly sentence number 15. So from that perspective, let's keep E as a choice. It kind of doesn't seem to encompass the whole thing, but if it's the best answer of them all, then it's one we should keep in. But to be honest with it, E seems weak just at the get-go. Okay. F. The skills used to play games can be useful, cool, as almost all occupations require people to make decisions that have positive, negative results. This seems out there. You could make a connection into there if you were doing an interpretation in your classroom, but this is not really even touched on in this paragraph or even in the passage. So I'm ruling out F completely. Okay, G. People who learn these things will develop, and these things being what's talked about in this paragraph. People who learn these things will develop strong interpersonal skills, which are an advantage when developing relationships. Okay, there's a big problem with this choice. It almost looks like it could be the answer, but there's one big problem. It's the word will. The passage doesn't say that. If it said may or might, I could buy this answer choice maybe. Even though I feel it's like E, it's not fully encompassing. It doesn't cover everything this paragraph said. Okay? But by the fact that it said will, you will develop this. That the author never goes there. So for that reason, G is nonsense. Okay? It's a teaser thing. And G says concentrating on a goal, responding well to positive and negative outcomes, and making logical decisions are valuable skills in many situations. Oh, that sounds beautiful. Okay, is that what's being said in 15? Does it talk about concentrating on a goal? Yeah, having self-control and collaborating. How about responding well to positive and negative outcomes? That's what collaboration is. That's what it is. Making logical decisions. Yeah, okay. And wait, where's I just lost the and are valuable skills in many situations. That's what this is talking about. It's not saying board games are going to solve the world and they're your interpersonal mecca to just get you any place. No, it's just saying board games are cool. There's certain benefits to them. They're entertaining, they're fun, but there's also strategic life kind of things where you're not going to play a Monopoly and say, gee, that changed my life. That's really not what this is about and what they're trying to say. So H really captures what's going on in that paragraph. Okay, all right, and then I think there's a third question now here still on this sample. Is everybody with me there? Is everybody with that analysis? And I'm taking my time going through some of these because you guys get so confused about some of this. In a way, what I'm doing is very dry and boring itself. So I have a boring passage with this guy talking boring about it. But a lot of you, it's just go past your heads and you're not getting able to grok it. And I'm trying to just lay things out step by step, painful step by step. And it's something you need to rehearse. A lot of you think practicing doing these problems is just about doing more and more and more of them. No, you need to think about it. Why did the test writers write this in the first place? What is the premise of what I'm being asked to answer? Why am I even being asked to answer it? Okay, and there's an underlying question, which is who even cares? And I don't mean who cares, like what's the importance of the SHSAT or that. I mean, like, what is the meat of this? Why did the test writer write this question? What's so significant about it to ask it to you? All right, that's what you really need to be worrying about. Don't worry about that it talks about Ticket to Ride was one of the board games here. That's not what anything is about. Okay, it's just not. That's what the reading comprehension is about. So even this is about proofreading, really, this revising and editing. We're still analyzing this at some overlapping level that it's the same kind of a thing. Okay, 3. What concluding sentence should follow sentence 20? So where is that? So that's at the end here too. So they want to add something there as well. So this has two significant aspects to it. First of all, it's the end of this paragraph, the last paragraph. It's also the concluding sentence of the whole passage. You have to make note of that. So that it's the concluding sentence may or may not come into play. So you have to make that decision when you're looking at the choices. So let's try to go through this top level again and see if we can see a pattern in the choices. If not, we'll just approach the questions for what they are, okay? Which concluding sentence and support the main argument presented in the passage. So they are asking you about the whole passage and not just about the last sentence of the last paragraph. So this has a super reason. It's applying to everything there, okay? So I'm going to notice a pattern here. It's people should, people should, people should, people should. So what should they do? Seek, choose, play, find. And then there's board games, board games, board games, board games. That. And then it's require, appeal, involve, and allow. So there's a split here again, right there, like that. So there's an A part to this question and a B part. So if it was people should jump on their board games, you might say, well, jumping on your board game had nothing to do with this passage. So you'd rule that out, just like that. So we're splitting this into two parts, right? And then if you notice, there's other parts. Develop strategies, encourage friends, interaction, and reap the benefits. All right? So there's even a third part to this. So again, this as a logic problem. A has to be true, B has to be true, and C has to be true. They're giving you the answer. Or this is so complicated that it's going to be hard to pull apart. So you see how we did that? We flipped this into a math problem for now, where we're actually taking the answers and building a table out of it. We're putting the answers as in a form of a table. You do this. Brian asked whether you should put the notes on the side. You should probably do this on your test paper as well, realizing that if you do it and it gets all scribbled up like here, you may not be able to read it. So be careful that you don't scribble too much there so that you can still read the questions. We're assuming for now that the test is not going to be online and that you're going to be able to do this. I'm also assuming that if you take an online test, that it has the capability to let you annotate just the way I did here, but maybe by using your finger and coloring and stuff in. A lot of online exams provide you an online calculator. Of course, we can't use calculators on the SHSAT. They provide you a little notepad that you can type notes in on the side, and some also let you use a touch screen where you can interact with a pen or a tablet, or whatever the case may be, okay? So there's stuff like that as well. Let me just make sure we're still live, because I don't want to talk into the ether. This is hard enough already. Okay, we're going an hour, so I'm going to end after this question. If anybody has general questions, start throwing them out there. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to bring the last paragraph back up, which is really the whole passage. So let me scroll this to it gets where we can get some of the paragraphs there, and also the last group of questions. Okay, so which concluding, and we have the benefit, by the way, at this point, which is that we ripped this paragraph to pieces, we slashed it, we interrogated it, we've analyzed this to death now, and we're at a good last question because we've pretty much ripped it apart as much as we possibly can, and we've understood about it as much as we can. And it turned out this is the last sentence. Now, if it turned out to have been the last question, if it turned out to be the first question, don't do it. Skip it. Make it last on purpose. You want to answer the other questions before this one. Because the other questions, remember I told you we're going to do a read and then the annotations was like a 1.25 read. Well, by making this last, and look, when we went back to refer to the passage to answer the other questions, we're getting like a 1.5 read into that. So by the time we get to a question like this, we've done like a greater than 1.5 read of the thing. So the first was an actual read, and the second half read was just trying to look stuff up, and as we're looking stuff up, we're learning more about the passage by doing that. Okay? Okay, I'll get to your question right after we do this, Justin. So, which concluding sentence would best follow to support the whole passage, not just the last thing? So, A, people seek out board games that require players to develop complex strategies to defeat opponents. Okay, so this choice I liked up until the point where it said to defeat opponents. So it did refer to this being fun and entertaining, but it also talked about board games being complex, involving strategy and all this other stuff. But it was really about cooperating and being teams and stuff like that. It wasn't really about being the winner per se. So for that reason, A was good up to that point, but I'm going to rule A out without even looking at the other choices. So A is a goner. Okay, B. Give me 1 second. My throat is running out. People should choose board games that appeal to them. Cool. And encourage friends and family to take a seat at the gaming table. In fact, I think that was part of what it originally said, which was to invite your family or something, maybe in the second paragraph. I'm not sure where that was, but I'm pretty sure it said to ask somebody to join you. In any event, that's the spirit of it. So, so B looks good from all choices. A, it's about choosing board games, yes, that appeal to them. And by the way, it asks it when it finally gets to talking about you, it actually asks you to make the choice. I believe that's in the last paragraph. There are hundreds of board games that can provide a balance between entertaining and challenge. So it's basically, why don't you pick a board game and ask others to join you? Okay, so it kind of works with that, and encourage family and friends to take a seat at the table. Yes. So B sounds like it might be it, but we have to rule everything out because there might still be a better answer. C, people should play board games that involve significant player interaction as they try to achieve the same or different goals. Okay, so the first half of that's definitely what this passage is about. It's about interacting, cooperating, being teams, working together with strategies and so on to achieve the same or different goals. It doesn't really go there. If anything, it's about achieving the same goals. So I think C. If C was if you read that and just gave me that one sentence C, I would say, yeah, sounds good, right? But now that we have choices, B is absolutely superior to C. And in some ways, C is not only weak, but it's almost false. Because when it says different goals, I think we can throw it out the window. Okay. And then we can try and look at G. People should find board games that allow friends and families to reap the benefits of regularly playing games. Okay, that sounds good too. So far we threw out A and C, and we're going to choose between B. Let me highlight that to you guys so it stands out to you. And the last choice, D. So people should choose board games that appeal to them and encourage friends and family to take a seat at a gaming table, versus people should find board games that allow friends and families to reap the benefits of regularly playing games. So is the author trying to say that it should be a choice you're making that you involve other people in, which I think is what B is trying to say? Or is it just that you should be doing this for reaping benefits? Now, if you look at all the blue handwriting I put on the side, that was all the benefits of board games, right? Was that not the benefits? Entertaining, fun, to cooperation, to be to improve your brain process, to be a part of a team. So there's certainly benefits involved in here. So how do we do that? So this in a way turns out to be another hair splitter. How do we break that tie? Okay. What should make us kind of do that? Anybody have ideas for that? Any thoughts on that? And it's definitely a hair splitter. So the good news is that if you were able to rule out A and C, you're down to 50-50. So in the worst case, you've gotten yourself to be at the hair splitter line. Okay, and the question is, how do you get past the hair splitter? Because the hair splitters are what this is what defines the SHSAT. Okay, it's not just getting the A and C ruled out. It's like you only get one shot at this. You don't get 1 point for answering B and 50 and half a point for answering D. And by the way, some tests are set up that way, but the SHSAT isn't. So how do we move to the next step? So let's look at it again. People should choose board games that appeal to them. So that seems to be what the last paragraph is saying. Board games is an excellent way to exercise one's brain. Engage with other people, right? So the author's explicitly saying that. One should be playing a game and one should be engaging with others. Okay, that's the concluding paragraph. There are hundreds of board games that can provide the balance between entertainment and a challenge. So let's rip apart B again. People should choose board games that appeal to them. That's part of what 19 is saying. Okay? And encourage friends and family to take at least take a seat at the game. And that's what it's saying, engage others. So B seems to be spot on. D. People should find board games that allow friends and families to reap the benefits of regularly playing games. Okay, so from that perspective, D is so close, but it's not exactly quite what's being said there. All right? So from that perspective, B as in boy is the answer. All right? So it was a hair splitter. All right? So does anybody have any questions about this? We're going to stop here. I'm going to answer James's question. So if you guys have questions, throw them out. So James asks, when is the SHSAT coming out? The answer is nobody knows. The Department of Education is playing a lot of sick games. I think there's a big problem in the Department of Education and through the mayor. This is becoming political, and it shouldn't be political. This is about getting into some good high schools with a test that's fair and just and balanced, and it's about manipulating and being divisive against the population. And I just got political here by saying that. The SHSAT should have happened in November. There was no reason it shouldn't be. They're saying it's going to start January 27th, and there's weasel wording going on there, so nobody knows if there's actually going to be a test date literally on January 27th. So all we could do is sit here and hang on, and hopefully it's going to be in about a month. If not, we're going to find out soon. It's what, December 27th or something? What is today's date? No, today's January 1st. So it's going to happen in about 3 weeks. So this ain't good. It's not good what the DOE is doing. If they're finally got their act together and finally doing the right thing, when you apply to my schools, they're only telling you that you're registered. In some past years, you could choose the date. In some past years before that, you were given a choice, and they finally told you the date. I'm hoping that they're by giving you some thing you have to click on to answer a choice, that they're letting you, they're going to come back and say, like, a lot of people said, like, February 10th, so they're going to do it then, or something like that. But right now, there was no official note made to the public, except that it's starting January 27th. That sounds like there will actually be tests on January 27th, but the way the DOE works is, first of all, they lie. They straight up lie. And second of all, they might say, well, it might start February 10th, and that meant it started the 27th. So there's a lot of weasel wording and double talking going on, all right? So my answer is I don't know what to tell you because the DOE is not telling anybody, which is really unfair, okay? I got 36 out of 57 for, ELA in one of the practice tests on the handbook. How should I improve that score? I got 5 wrong for revising and editing. Ugh, that killed you then. Okay, so here's some more bad news. I believe there's going to be more revising and editing questions this year if the SHSAT finally happens. So that makes your plight a little worse. If you got 5 wrong, if they add, I believe they're going to add 8 more revising and editing questions and remove at least 1 passage. So that makes your plight worse. What you need to do is really hone your grammar. First of all, you got something out of the way I'm ripping these things apart. But at the end of the day, some of this, especially in the revising and editing section A, it really is about knowing your grammar rules. My personal students had the benefit of sitting with me. I've gone over multiple sessions with each of them, only covering grammar. Only covering grammar. Stuff like the Rev A part, only questions like that. Across the board. Drilling stuff through. Definitely go on Kaplan. Hiring me as a tutor, obviously, is a good way to do it. But I understand the situation of a lot of you, which is why I offer a lot of you all this free help and so on. It's a tough one if you don't know the grammar rules. You really must. And it's not taught in the classrooms. That's the problem. And you can't go by gut feeling. You cannot go by gut feeling. The good news, though, is, Brian, I know you're good in the math section. So one strategy is to try to ace the math section. Because the more points you get right in a section, the higher your score will be. Okay? I don't want to just leave you with just that, though, because if you can ace the math and bump up your ELA score, it's going to be a slam dunk. It's also going to make your high school experience easier. Just because the more you know and the more you learn and all that kind of stuff, the better off you're going to be with it. But short of that, when they're asking questions, and if we go into that section, and I'm not going to cover these questions right now, but if we go into the revising editing section, there's certain things you need to keep aware of. Where's the section? The other thing I would say is that I do have hundreds of YouTubes already, including a past year's review I did already. If you go to, let me post it into the chat. Give me 1 second. Yeah, these past few months, whoops. Give me 1 second. What do you write? The past few months, I've been studying only math, which is why my ALS score got that low, because I haven't practiced ELA in a while. Yeah, you have to, striking that balance is so important. It really is. And in some ways, it's almost like you can lose your kind of status on something like that. I forgot. What was I looking up for you? I just said I was going to post a link to something. What was it? Oh, the past handbook. I'm going to post the link to that right now. So at least you can get at least some more info from me about how I approached it in the 2017 handbook. I already did a cover-to-cover walkthrough, so it includes the Rev A and the Rev B as well. I've also done other YouTubes where I just talk about them. Again, it's dry and boring, but it's something you need to kind of get through. There really isn't any other sources except for hiring somebody like me. There's a dearth of information on the internet. It's really not there, which I know is tough for you guys who try to do it solo, including especially the kids trying to do grade 9 SHSAT. Grade 8 is hard enough. So that's the issue there. And the other problem is, like any general thing I could tell you right now about bumping up the Rev A section, you probably already know. So that's what makes it hard, because I can give you general tidbits, but 99% it's all common sense and you would know it already. And what we really need to do now is sit down with you and figure out exactly what you know and don't know. Let me crawl into your brain, that kind of a thing. That's the benefit of that. So, all right. Does anybody else have any other questions? Otherwise, we'll call it a day at New Year's Day. All right. Please subscribe to the channel. Give this a thumbs up. Give it a like. There's 3 of you out there. There was a couple before. So if you're catching on the replay, Happy New Year. And we'll resume. I'll do the next time. I'll jump into the actual test itself now that we've covered all the sample questions. But the sample questions are just as valid and on the level as the test ones are going to be. And then we'll just keep inching forward. All right, as we go through each section. Like I said, I'm going to do about an hour each time. There might be some days I don't do anything. There might be some days I do 2 hours. This is going to probably take about 20 sessions altogether. And it's free. Yeah. All right. Happy New Year, people, and peace out.